We are going to be talking today about ownership. Yes, ownership. What does the agency or the marketer own versus the client, right? So if you've ever had that where you're offboarding a client and now there's this messy thing where you're not really sure, like, well, I built this. Should I give this to them? I mean, the client built this. Like, do we still own some of that as well? And just kind of, I think Michael and I could just kind of discuss that, talk about some of the things we've been through and what our kind of standard operating procedures are for that. So, Michael, any initial thoughts around that?
Mate, I've got a lot of thoughts, but I actually, well, because you came up with the idea, I'm curious to where this came up from, if you've had an experience recently, and your approach. I will tell you what we do internally, but I want to know yours first, mate. I'm curious. I'm real curious.
Sure. Well, it came up because I'm tightening some of my contracts. Just trying to tighten up any loose ends in the contracts. Make sure that everything is very, very clear in the outset, right?
Yep.
Make sure all the responsibilities are clear. What is in the scope of work? What is not? And then also, how does the offboarding process look like? Because I don't want to get into any kind of legal BS. And again, disclaimer, this is not legal advice. Make sure that you are tapping into some kind of legal expert, not us. So just a quick disclaimer for the channel and for Michael and I, we are not legal experts by any means. So anyway, so what I would usually, that's how it came up. But what I usually try to look at is in a box is we're going to have, as an agency, we're going to have proprietary systems, automations, something, maybe it's scripts, whatever it is, something that we use to standardize some of the campaign management from a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-over-month process, whatever. Those things are yours, in my opinion. Those things are owned by you. The things that are the client's data itself, like the client owns their data. I definitely believe that. They're the ones paying for it. This is where things can get a little bit messy, where you're like, well, our data is inside of the system that you have, but you should, if you're setting up these automations, you should have ways to kind of push a button and get rid of all that data, because you do not want to be holding on to that data. Just long term, it's not good for your agency. It creates a liability for the business. If anything ever happens to your data, that becomes a compromised thing. So you don't want that. So you want to have some kind of automation system that gets rid of all the spreadsheets, anything that has anything to do with that client's data. Do not hold on to it. It is not worth the potential liability. So those are my initial thoughts. I tend to think about it like that. We have our proprietary stuff that's ours. The client has their data and they have their own systems and things. Obviously, they're going to own their own CRM, for example. They need to be owning that CRM. I don't have any place in staying within their Salesforce, for example.
So I've still got some more questions for you, Cory, before we go on. Ad accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Does the client own it?
Right. It's a common one. I do not personally believe in the agency owning an account. I know that is something that agencies will do, where they build the account from scratch for you and it lives inside their MCC. They're the full admin owner of that account and they will not give it back to you. I've heard from, I'm sure you've heard about this as well, right? Where clients will say, we used to have a decent ad account, but that agency has full ownership over it and they wouldn't transfer it to us when we moved away. I don't really like that personally. I think it sounds a little shady to me. It's kind of like you're just locking the client in to your stuff, and once they are ready to move away, they can't take those algorithmic learnings in that data with them. I'm not a big believer in that.
Yeah. And what about in the case of the agency owns or runs the account, but they haven't been paid 3-6 months worth of invoices?
It shouldn't have gotten that far in the first place.
I understand, but in that case of, like, if someone has access and ownership of the account, should they hand it over if they've got outstanding bills?
Are you saying if you created the account for them?
Yeah.
Oh, I would never get in that. I don't create accounts for clients. They create it. They put up their own billing. I never put my own billing in there. So it's not something.
Because this is something that I've been thinking about. We've had some, with my other company, some clients that have just overdue their bills. Like, it's like a month or two now. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking about putting in the contract that if they haven't paid their bills, we just automatically own the account and the data until paid, or till our discretion. And the reason I say that is, well, let's loop back to the start of this. So from my experience, it's a really interesting area because there's the data side and there's the intellectual property side. The data side is like the clients own the data. Like, we can debate that. I think the client should own their data. But how do they own their data? Like, does that mean they own the account? Because the data might just be all the revenue, clicks, all that data, and you can export that as a CSV file.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the IP, I think that's where the gray area that I sit with now. It's like I've done this for a long time, and I know what I do works. And the risk I can face is if I build out an account, people could just take it and leave after a month. They could.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the ways I've moved around that is by actually a lot of people, especially in the advertising space, think the advertising account's where the value is, being like it's 100% of the value. What I've done over the last multiple years is moved away from the ad account to like there's the ad accounts, so there'd be Google and Facebook. Then there's the reporting dashboards. Then there's the lead pages or the landing pages and the integrations as well. So if they do leave, they leave with the ad account, which is probably only about 30% of the success. So that's what, for me, I've thought about is ownership of the account. I think the clients should have it, granted that they came in and brought the account. If you've built it up and stuff, I still think there's a bit of a gray area. I don't know what it is. I think the reality is it's just like if they're a good person and a good client, obviously, but if they've been negative, bad, they haven't paid you, they're asking for stuff, they're requesting stuff when you're not even in contract anymore, I think that's when a point you can be like, no, man, those are just my thoughts. I don't know, because it's a very gray area. It seems like yeah, the client owns the account, but there are so many cases that I've faced and seen other people face where you're like, it's probably best that you actually do have some ownership from the start, and then once the contract's ended, you decide what happens. If they come in with an account, that's their account. But if you build the account in your MCC, I think that's where the gray area can be held. But you work with businesses who already have an account. So
Almost
from your
always,
experience, yeah, so that would be different. But if you've got a client who comes in, they have known nothing, they're paying you a small amount, you build this thing up, it's going well.
Yeah.
To the extent, I think it really comes down to the contract. You just say, like, is this a product that you're creating or a service? If it's a product, then they own the account. If it's a service, if it's built in your MCC, it could be yours. And the other thing is Google only sees it as one binary thing, which is whose credit card's in the account. That's how Google says it. Whoever's paying for the ad spend owns the ad account. So if you're paying for the ad spend for the business, technically under Google's rules, you own the account. If they're paying for it, they own the account. As in, they're paying for it directly from their credit card to the account, not through a invoicing system. So
that's interesting.
This comes to the data side, which is, your reports that you create, Cory, and we create as well. What do you do in those cases? Like someone leaves, they're like, okay, they've taken their account with them, but they're like, hey, what about all our reports and all that data that you've created for us? What do you do in that case?
Well, for me, you mean create the data in terms of their performance data? Like sort of that's data that I've worked with? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like your reporting dashboards and the data integrations that you've done and all that, crazy stuff that you do.
That's all proprietary. Yeah. Look, I mean, they wouldn't understand it if I gave it to them anyway. Yeah. That's no shade on them or their intelligence. Yeah. It's very advanced. Their ETL pipelines, it's a lot of code, it's a lot of automations, a lot of pieces getting connected and set up. And also I'm wrapping other clients into those systems. Of course, from a data privacy standpoint, they live on their own islands to protect everybody and as well as myself. So they're not like getting all mixed together, but it's if I give them that, I'm essentially giving them like an entire agency proprietary tool, and that doesn't make sense. In my contracts outline that is clearly owned by me. There's not going to be any transfer of ownership for those types of things. That's essentially your secret sauce. If they're really looking for high level management, they're wanting that. They're really paying for that. That's the last thing you should be really giving up, in my opinion.
Yeah, interesting. I think this is actually a really good episode, because we do hear about those agencies. I worked at one that were like, we build the account, we own the account. Even if they came with their own account, we're just like, we build it up from the start again. Even if there's a merchant center and you've got to like reconfigure all that stuff, and they still did that. And I think that's on one side of the extreme, but it really just depends on how you position yourself. And if you tell them up front, like, hey, we build the accounts for you, like, and we own the account. But then that agency did make clients pay for their credit card fees. So like for the ad costs in terms of when it was being directly from Google. So in that case, Google would see that they own the account. So yeah, man, like it's an interesting one because as time's going on now, and you're probably seeing this more and more, I think even this argument really comes from like you've got to, I will, at least me, is move away from the assumption that we're just talking about the ad account because most of advertising now is not in the ad account. So to what extent is it the stuff that's beyond the ad account, your reporting dashboards, the APIs you've created? Because a lot of the work that you and I do is stuff that requires external tools from the Google ad account that if they stop, it affects the ad account. So what do you do in that case in terms of like when you're offboarding a client and their ad account's so reliant on like third-party APIs and things that you've built? Do you just go, hey, look, sorry, you just turn it off? Like,
yeah, I almost never have third-party APIs. I build out my own ETL pipelines. It saves me a lot of money. I enjoy it, and I hire people along the way if I need any help with that. So it's not something I have to worry about in terms of third-party APIs. But I do just try to, like I never take it personally when a client decides they want to go. Not to brag, but it doesn't happen very often. So this is not something I have deep knowledge of because my retention rates are multiple years. I mean, clients find me, they never want to go anywhere else. It just is what it is. So I don't have to deal with that very often, thankfully. So I'm lucky there. But I mean, I would try to give them a heads up, right? You want to give them a heads up, like, look, here's the things that are running. Like, you don't have to go through every little automation, but just help them understand that as part of this sort of maybe last 30 days, at the end of that 30 days, here's what is going to stop that your next agency, if you don't have communication with the next agency, here's what they're going to have to, if you want things to transition smoothly, here are some of the things that have been being done automatically, just like the major stuff. Like if the next agency probably going to inherit some of those automated rules, but as soon as your email gets removed from the account, all of a sudden, all those things are not going to work correctly, scripts, whatever. So, it can be a messy process. I do find a lot of agencies don't even want to communicate with the agency taking over. Maybe it's just out of spite, or they're just sort of like, hey, I'm not getting paid extra for this, which is also a reasonable argument.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting one. How do you guys usually look at offboarding and the times that you have to do that?
Well, I simply just look at it as this. There's a scope of work that we do. Yeah. Offboarding is not in the scope. We have an offboarding package if they want it, but the offboarding package is only relevant within that last month as well. Once the contract is done, no additional work is done. Right. No additional help is given. We've had that this week where a client needs access to a Facebook ads account. They're temporarily gone on pause. And I was just saying to my team, guys, they're not paying us at the moment. We can't help with this. And like, but the client this and that. I'm like, at the end of the day, if the client isn't paying, I'm paying. Do you want me, like you're asking me right now to be paying X amount of $100 an hour for your billable hours for this? Is that reasonable? And it's like, no, it's like, if the client needs stuff done before they like go on pause, that's on them, not us. There's a scope of work for our management, and then there's an offboarding product if they do want that. But the challenge is with offboarding, it's like a custom project. You can't just include an additional custom project within your current scope of work. And in the past, like most of the time, like the reality is for most people, it's just like, they leave their ad account in your MCC and then they just get someone else to run it. It's like, it's not some big thing. But the issue is when it becomes like, oh, we need this from you guys. We need this from you guys. It's like, guys, we don't have the actual time capacity to do that. And that's like, and I think that's why when we're talking about before scope of work's really important because this is not in the scope. And I know it sounds like, but then what are they supposed to do? It's like they can hire additional hours or if they want additional consulting on this, but it's outside of scope. And then also there's the next part, which is, let's just say they finish on the 30th of April and it's the 5th of May and they need stuff from you. Oh, Cory, can we just get a few notes on this? Do you give that or not? Like they're not paying you anymore. You have no obligation and it's outside of scope. Like what would you do, Cory, if you've worked for a client for 6 months, not that they've been an extraordinary client. They've just been another average client, just annoying you with like random emails. Like they're nothing like, they're like, of course I'll go above and beyond. What would you do in that case? It's a week after their contract's finished, everything's done. You have helped them a bit with some offboarding stuff, but they're asking now for some like transition notes and additional help. What would you do in that
Oh,
case?
I see. So it's already outside. I mean, look, I'm running a business here, so are they. They should understand it's already outside of the scope of the work. The contract said the end date is 30 days from the time we've given that notice.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but that life, the world is never going to be fair, and I'm also, but I need to set reasonable boundaries for me as a business, just like you would do with your customers and your clients. Well, it's the same thing here.
Yeah.
I can't be extending myself, because then where does it end, right? I mean, once it's that, maybe there's another thing, and then, hey, how did you used to manage the match types? It's like, we just can't get into that. We can't enable that type of behavior, and our time is incredibly valuable, like we talked about in a recent podcast episode. So you can't short yourself by extending yourself too much beyond what you've already agreed to legally. And it's just a legal matter, I think, at that point. It's not about being nice or being mean or anything like that. It just is. It's the business contract that we have agreed to in terms of scope of work, and it is what it is.
So you're talking about scope of work right now in terms of the end date. What about the scope of work of the actual scope of work? So they give you the 30 days notice, but your scope of work is we do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But this offboarding is not part of your scope of work. What do you do in that situation?
Oh, it's just here's as a reminder, as part in the contract, this section, it's not included in the scope of work. So unfortunately,
so if they start asking, well, what I'm saying is it's within that 30 days, they give you notice, and then they're starting to want offboard, and they're asking you all these questions, but those questions and the data requests they have are not in your scope of work. Would you just go no to it, or like what's your approach in that case?
Well, that was what I was saying. So if it's not in the scope of work, it's just like refer to the contract. That completely falls outside of the scope of work. Yeah. We both agreed to this contract. We both signed this contract. You had plenty of time to review it, and your legal team reviewed it. You guys talked it over. You signed that contract. Like, we're both adults here. You signed on the dotted line, said you're okay with this being the scope of work. This is what you're paying for.
Yep.
Anything outside of that is just not a part of the services that I'm providing.
So if they're like, hey, can we just get a summary of the ad account and like the strategies that you use for our next agency? You'll just be like, no, like it's outside the scope of work.
Unfortunately, it's outside of the scope of work.
Cool. Yes. And I think, I think a lot of people need to hear this, because there's a big virus in the industry of like, no, you've got to always go above and beyond for everyone. And like, people treat you poorly, and like, just go above and beyond. And I think there comes a point where you're like, no, the scope of work is the agreement. Anything outside of that is they're asking for free money, free advice. Like, it's just like you have no obligation to do that. And I know it goes against the whole thing of, treat your clients exceptionally well. It's like you can treat them exceptionally well and just only stick to your scope of work. But as soon as it creeps out of that, you have scope creep, which then that's what actually kills your business. You're paying the price. Treat it like that. If they're not paying, you're paying. Like there's $1 being exchanged here. It's either they're exchanging it to you or you're exchanging it to them. Yep. And if you're running a business, you don't want to be paying your clients. Right. I know it sounds overly simplistic, but I think that's like super important for people to recognize and realize is someone's paying at the end of the day. Nothing's free. Your time is not free. The expertise is not free. It's either they're paying you or you're paying them.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I think it's just as simple as that.